Chapter 1. The Scent of Soap and Silence. The air in the laundry house was thick, so heavy you could taste it, a nasty mix of harsh lye soap, damp wool, and the sweat of a dozen omegas working without a break. Steam ghosted from massive iron tubs, clinging to Arwen's skin, making her worn tunic stick to her back. For her, this was the smell of survival. This was the sound of her life, the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of wooden paddles beating dirt from the pack warrior's clothes, the endless drone of gossip, and the pointed silence that always seemed to follow her. It was a silence louder than any shout, a silence that screamed, "You don't belong." Her left leg throbbed, a familiar, deep ache, a constant reminder. Every step, every time she bent to lift a waterlogged basket, the pain shot up from her ankle to her hip. She moved with a limp she'd had since birth, a flaw that defined her in the eyes of the Silver Moon Pack. Broken Arwen, the Omega with the weak wolf. She'd heard the whispers so many times they were just background noise now, like the buzzing of flies. Her goal for today was the same as every other day: be invisible, finish her work, survive. And there was one more thing. A secret goal that made the aching leg and the stinging silence worth it. Following the Elder Omega's sharp command, Arwen hoisted a basket brimming with wet clothes. The weight was brutal. It made her bad leg tremble, and she fought to keep her balance on the slippery stone floor. She could feel their eyes on her, waiting for her to stumble, to fall, to prove them right, to prove she was as weak as they all thought. A flicker of something hot and defiant coiled in her gut. Her wolf, the one they called Broken, stirred within her. It wasn't a powerful feeling. No, it was more like a tiny, stubborn ember refusing to be smothered. She gritted her teeth, her knuckles white on the wicker handle. She took another shuffling step, just a few more feet. Then, just as she passed the cooling racks, she saw her chance. A loaf of day-old bread, left forgotten on a crate. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Stealing was a serious offense, punished with days of starvation. But the image of a small, trusting face flashed in her mind. Myra. The risk was worth it. Because Myra's hunger, that was a pain far worse than any punishment they could give her. With emotion so swift it was almost a blur, her hand darted out. The bread was rough and crusty beneath her calloused fingers. She shoved it deep inside her worn leather jacket, the warmth of it a secret promise against her skin. She did it. She didn't get caught. Having completed her task in the laundry, Arwen kept her head down, her eyes on the floor, and moved toward the exit. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't dare. She just had to get out of there, because every second she stayed, the secret in her jacket felt like it was screaming to be discovered. She was just an Omega with a limp, invisible, and ignored. That was her only protection. The cool evening air hit her face as she slipped out the door, a gasp of freedom after hours of suffocating steam. The heavy basket was left behind. Her duties for the day were done. Now, her real purpose could begin. The weight in her jacket felt heavier than any basket of laundry. It was the weight of hope. Chapter 2. A Story of a Different World. After leaving the oppressive heat of the laundry, Arwen moved through the shadows of the pack grounds, a ghost in her own home. She avoided the main paths, her feet finding the familiar hidden trails that snaked behind the barracks and the kitchens. Her destination was a small, forgotten alcove tucked away behind the Elder's Den, a place overgrown with ivy and smelling of damp earth and old stone. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. It was safe. A tiny girl with eyes as big and dark as the night sky was waiting for her, perched on a mossy rock. Myra. "Arwen!" the little girl whispered, her voice a tiny bird's chirp. She scrambled off the rock and threw her small arms around Arwen's legs, burying her face in the rough fabric of her tunic. Arwen's heart, so guarded and tight just moments before, seemed to melt. A real, genuine smile touched her lips. A rare thing. She knelt, ignoring the protest from her bad leg, and hugged the child back. "I'm here, little wolf. I'm here." She pulled the bread from her jacket. Myra's eyes went wide with a light that could have outshone the moon. Arwen broke the loaf in two, giving the larger piece to the orphan girl who devoured it like she hadn't eaten in days, because she probably hadn't. Arwen took a small bite of her own piece, but her hunger was satisfied just by watching Myra eat. This moment, right here, was why she endured everything else. Once the bread was gone, Arwen settled onto the ground, leaning against the cold stone wall, and pulled Myra into her lap. From another hidden fold in her jacket, she produced her most treasured possession, a tattered, soft-covered book. Its pages were worn thin, the pictures faded. It was a human book, a story about cities with lights that touched the sky and metal birds that flew through the clouds. "Shall we see where they go today?" Arwen murmured. Myra nodded eagerly, her small head resting against Arwen's chest. Arwen began to read, her voice a low murmur, painting pictures of a world without alphas, without packs. A world where a girl with a limp might not be seen as broken, but just as a girl. Could such a place even be real? The story was their escape, a fragile dream they built together in the shadows. But just as she was describing a place called an ocean, a sudden commotion from the main clearing shattered their peace. An elder, his voice booming with authority, was making an announcement. "All pack members assemble. Alpha Kalen of the Duskbane Pack arrives within the hour. He comes to discuss an alliance, show our strength, show our respect." A collective gasp rippled through the pack members who were gathering. Arwen's blood ran cold. Kalen. The Duskbane Alpha. Stories about him were told in hushed, frightened whispers. They said he was cruel, savage, that he'd killed his own uncle to take the Alpha title. Arwen's arm tightened around Myra instinctively. The world of dreams had just vanished, replaced by a harsh and dangerous reality. Chapter 3. The Shadow of the Alpha. Immediately following the Elder's startling proclamation, the pack grounds erupted, a frenzy of controlled panic. Warriors straightened their leather armor. Unmated she-wolves scrambled to fix their hair, their eyes alight with a mix of fear and ambitious hope. Arwen quickly hid her book and ushered a frightened Myra back towards the Omega quarters, promising to see her later. Her only goal now was to become a shadow again, to blend into the stone walls and disappear. Powerful visitors meant politics, and politics meant danger for those at the bottom. She found a spot near the kitchens, a place where she could finish her duties of scrubbing pots while remaining mostly unseen. But she couldn't block out the gossip. It buzzed around her, sharp and fast. "They say he's looking for a Luna," one she-wolf, Lyra, whispered excitedly. "An alliance sealed with a mating bond." Another one, Tessa, scoffed. "Don't get your hopes up, it will be Celine, it has to be." Arwen's hands stilled in the greasy water. Celine, the Beta's sister, beautiful, strong, and as ambitious as they came. She treated Arwen with a special kind of cruelty, a casual disdain that made Arwen's skin crawl. The idea of Celine as Luna of two packs, it was a terrifying thought. The air itself seemed to change then. A hush fell over the chattering pack. A heavy, palpable energy rolled through the grounds. A wave of pure, undiluted power. It made the tiny hairs on Arwen's arms stand up. He's here. She risked a peek around the corner of the kitchen building. A procession of massive warriors, all clad in black leather that seemed to swallow the evening light, strode into their territory. They were bigger than Silver Moon's fighters, their faces harder. And at their lead was him. He was too far away to see clearly. Just a tall, broad-shouldered silhouette against the setting sun. But the power coming off him was like a physical force, an alpha of alphas. And then something else hit her. A scent. It wasn't the familiar smell of pine and earth that clung to her own pack. This was something else entirely, something wild, intoxicating. It smelled of night-blooming jasmine, of distant storms, of wood smoke, and something fiercely, primally, male. It cut through the air, bypassing her nose and striking a chord deep, deep inside her. Her head swam. Her wolf, normally a quiet ember, surged like a bonfire. What? Is that? The scent pulled at her, a physical tug, demanding her attention. Demanding her. For a dizzying second, her feet wanted to move toward him. A reckless, insane urge. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus on the dirty pot in her hands. It was nothing. It was just an alpha's power, something she was not meant for. She was broken. She was invisible. She had to remember that. But even as she scrubbed, the strange, wonderful, terrifying scent lingered in the air. A question mark that hung over her entire world.
Chapter 4. Jasmine and Defiance. The scent was driving him mad. Kalen stalked the training grounds of the Silver Moon Pack, his own beta, Marcus, talking beside him. He wasn't listening. The words were just a meaningless buzz, like flies buzzing around his head. His focus, his entire being, was consumed by the scent he'd caught the night before. Jasmine and rain, and something else, something that felt like home, a home he'd never known. He needed to find its source. It was a primal urge, an ache in his soul. His wolf paced restlessly under his skin, demanding he find it, and claim it. He hated these political visits, the endless bowing, the fake smiles, the ambitious she-wolves throwing themselves at him. He came here for an alliance because his pack needed a stronger border against the feral rogues that were becoming bolder. But right now, none of that mattered. Only the scent. His eyes scanned the training warriors, the servants, anyone, searching. Then he saw her. She was near the laundry lines, her arms full with a heavy basket of clothes. Her tunic was worn, her hair a simple brown braid. She was plain, unremarkable. But the scent was pouring off her in waves, pulling him in like a tide. It was her. Before he could even process it, one of the pack warriors, a smug-looking brute, stuck out his foot. Deliberately, he tripped her. The basket went flying. She tumbled to the dirt with a small, pained cry. A low, vicious growl ripped through Kalen's chest, a sound of pure, unrestrained fury. His wolf lunged forward in his mind, ready to tear the warrior's throat out. How dare he touch her? He took a step forward, ready to kill. But she moved first. She pushed herself up, her face smudged with dirt, and turned on the warrior. "Watch where you're going, you clumsy oaf," she snapped, her voice sharp and clear. The warrior looked shocked, arrogant. He opened his mouth to retort, but she was already turning away, gathering the scattered laundry. Her eyes met Kalen's. They were brown, but held sparks of gold, and they were blazing with defiance. "And I don't need any help," she bit out, aimed directly at him. Kalen froze. No one spoke to him like that. He was an alpha, a king, and this small, broken omega, he could now see the slight pained limp in her posture, was looking at him not with fear or awe, but with annoyance. The shock of it was like a bucket of ice water. The mate pull slammed into him. Hard. It wasn't just a scent anymore. It was a face. It was a flash of fire. It was mine.
Chapter 5. A Brush of Fire. For the next 2 days, Arwen felt like a mouse being stalked by a hawk. Everywhere she went, she felt his eyes on her. Alpha Kalen. When she was scrubbing floors, she'd feel a prickle on the back of her neck and look up to see him standing across the courtyard, watching her. When she was serving at the head table, a duty she now dreaded, she could feel the weight of his gaze from across the massive hall. It was terrifying. It was confusing. Why was he looking at her? An alpha like him didn't look at a broken omega like her unless it was for a cruel joke. She tried her best to ignore it, to keep her head down, to go on with her life. But it was impossible. He was everywhere. One afternoon, she was rushing down a narrow hallway, her arms filled with clean linens. She was hurrying because she wanted to avoid him. But as she rounded a corner, he was right there, a wall of muscle and power. There was no room to pass. Her heart leaped into her throat. She tried to flatten herself against the stone wall, to let him by. "Excuse me, Alpha," she mumbled, her eyes glued to the floor. He didn't say a word. He just moved past her, his broad shoulder brushing against hers. And as he did, his hand brushed against hers. Fire! A jolt of pure heat, like lightning, shot up her arm. It was so intense, so shocking, she gasped and dropped the linens. Her wolf leaped inside her, howling with a feeling she didn't understand. A feeling that was equal parts fear and want. She looked up, her eyes wide with shock. His golden brown eyes were locked on her, blazing with an intensity that stole her breath. He held her gaze for a heart-stopping second, his expression unreadable, before he turned and continued down the hall without a word. Arwen was left trembling, her hand tingling where he'd touched her. What was happening? This strange pull, this fire. She feared it was some kind of trick, a dangerous game she couldn't afford to play. She just wanted to be left alone. She wanted to be invisible. But as she bent to pick up the linens, she knew one thing for sure. Alpha Kaelin wasn't going to let her be invisible anymore. The final straw came that evening. An order, delivered by a grim-faced beta. Arwen was to attend the formal alliance dinner that night, in the Great Hall, a place she and Omega had never been allowed to eat. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her confusion. This was a trap. It had to be.
Chapter 6. The Alpha's Claim. Kaelin sat at the head table, a goblet of wine untouched in his hand. The great hall was filled with noise, with laughter, with the scent of roasted meat and silver moon wolves trying too hard to impress him. He ignored it all. His eyes were fixed on one person, Arwen. She sat at a small, distant table as far away from him as possible. She looked terrified. Small, utterly out of place in her plain, mended dress. He had ordered her to be here. He knew it was cruel, but he couldn't help it. He needed to see her. His wolf was a raging storm beneath his skin, demanding he go to her, claim her, and get her away from all these prying eyes. He had to fight every second to stay in his seat. Then Celine made her move. He watched her approach Arwen's table, her movements like a predatory cat. She was beautiful, he supposed, but her scent was all wrong. Sharp ambition and something sour. She leaned down, her voice a poisonous whisper that still carried in the tense silence she created around them. "I'm surprised to see something so broken allowed in the great hall," Celine sneered, her eyes flicking pointedly to Arwen's leg. "Shouldn't you be scrubbing the floors where you belong?" The scent of Arwen's shame, her fear, it hit Kaelin like a physical blow, and something inside him snapped. Control, gone. Politics, irrelevant. The Alpha? No. The wolf was in charge now. He rose from his chair. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to him. He didn't see them. He only saw her, his mate, humiliated. He crossed the room. Each step was heavy, deliberate. A predator closing in. Celine's smug face paled as he approached, but he didn't even look at her. He stopped right in front of Arwen. She was looking up at him, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. He saw her fear, and he hated that he was the cause of it. But he had no choice. He had to show them all. He had to show her. He leaned down, his hand coming up to cup the back of her neck, holding her steady. He ignored her flinch. He lowered his head to the juncture of her neck and shoulder, inhaling her scent, jasmine, rain, and fear. And then, with a possessive, final growl that echoed in the deathly quiet hall, he bit down. He felt the shockwave of the bond slamming into place. A raw, primal connection that tied his soul to hers. Forever. He had marked her, in front of everyone. She was his, and now the whole world knew it.
Chapter 7. An Order and an Attack. The world was a roaring buzz in Arwen's ears. Pain, sharp and hot, radiated from her neck, but it was nothing compared to the tidal wave of the bond crashing over her. It was a dizzying flood of his emotions. His possessiveness, his rage, his shocking relief. Her own wolf was howling, a wild mix of terror and a terrifying sense of coming home. He pulled back, his golden eyes blazing, his scent of storms and jasmine wrapping around her like a cage. Celine's face was a mask of pure, murderous fury. The entire hall was silent, staring at her. "You are coming with me." Kaylin's voice was a low growl, not a request, an order. Something inside Arwen, the same stubborn ember from the laundry house, flared to life. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. She pushed against his chest. "I am not your property." "You are my mate," he snarled, his grip tightening just enough to remind her of his immense strength. "My pack is half a day's ride from here. You will be safe there." "Safe? You bit me in front of everyone. You've just painted a target on my back." She shot back, her fear making her reckless. This couldn't be happening. She had to get away, to find Myra, to run. Suddenly, a piercing scream cut through the tense silence of the hall. It came from outside. It was followed by another, and the scent of blood. "Rogue!" The word rippled through the stunned pack. Chaos erupted. Warriors drew blades. Betas shouted orders. Arwen's heart stopped cold. The attack was on the west side of the compound, right near the Omega quarters, near Myra. She shoved past Kaylin, her limp more pronounced in her panic, and ran toward the door. She saw them then. 3 mangy, wild-eyed rogues, their claws dripping with blood, being fought back by the Silver Moon warriors. But they were close. Too close to the small dens where the children slept. Myra could be in danger. This was happening because of her, wasn't it? Because the powerful Alpha had shown interest in her. This was her fault. Kaylin was beside her in an instant, a solid wall of power. "They will keep coming for you," he said, his voice low and urgent, right by her ear. "For anyone near you. Is she safe here, Arwen? Is she?" He already knew about Myra. "How?" "With me, she will be protected. I swear it." Arwen looked at the savage fight, at the blood on the ground, and then at Kaylin's fierce, determined face. He was a monster. He was a cage. But he was offering Myra a shield. He was right. She couldn't protect Myra here, not anymore. She had no choice. "I'll come," she choked out, the words tasting like ash. For her. Only for her.
Chapter 8. One bed. One storm. The journey to his territory was a blur of tense silence. Kaylin had put her, his mate, and the small child Myra, in a guarded carriage. He rode alongside, his wolf a snarling beast under his skin. It was furious at the distance between them. It wanted her on his horse in his arms where he could protect her, where he could feel her. He had to fight for control the entire way. He did this for her protection. He had to, because he knew Celine and her allies would not hesitate to harm an unmarked Omega. Now she was his, and the danger was 100 times worse. When they finally arrived at his main residence, a fortress of dark stone and timber built into the side of a mountain, he saw the fear in her eyes. This place was him. Powerful, intimidating, overwhelming. He had a room prepared for her, separate from his own. It was a gesture of goodwill, an attempt to give her space. He wanted to earn her trust, not just demand her submission. A foolish thought, perhaps. As night fell, the sky opened up. A vicious storm slammed into the mountain, the wind howling like a hungry wolf and rain lashing against the thick glass windows. The sound of it echoed his own inner turmoil. He was checking the fortress perimeter when one of his guards approached him. "Alpha, there is a problem. The guest chamber," The roof has sprung a leak. A bad one. Kaylin's jaw tightened. He went to her room immediately. And there it was. A steady stream of icy water, dripping from the ceiling right onto the center of her bed, soaking the thick furs. Arwen stood in the corner, looking small and lost, shivering in the damp chill. "You can't stay here," he stated, his voice rougher than he intended. She just stared at him, her arms wrapped around herself, defiant, proud, and so damn vulnerable it made his bones ache. "My room is dry," he said, trying to soften his tone. He took a step closer. "My bed is large enough, and it's warm." The words hung in the air, thick with meaning he hadn't intended, but couldn't deny. He saw the suspicion in her eyes, the way she flinched. She thought this was a trick, a ploy. Maybe it was. He wasn't sure himself anymore. All he knew was that the thought of her being cold, it was unacceptable. He watched her internal battle. The rigid set of her jaw, the flicker of fear in her eyes. Finally, with a small, defeated nod, she followed him out of the room. The scent of her, jasmine and rain, filled his senses as she walked into his chambers, into his space, into his world, and his wolf purred with a deep, possessive satisfaction.
Chapter
Home.
9. A dangerous comfort. Walking into Kaylin's room was like walking into the heart of the storm itself. His scent was everywhere, on the heavy fur blankets, in the wood smoke from the massive stone fireplace, in the very air she breathed. It was overwhelming, suffocating. Her wolf, however, seemed to love it. It uncurled inside her, feeling a strange sense of peace that terrified Arwen to her core. The bed was huge, a mountain of dark furs and pillows, big enough for 4 people. She stiffly climbed onto the far edge, as far away from him as she could possibly get, and lay rigid, her back to him. Sleep was impossible. The storm raged outside, the tension crackled inside, and she was cold. So cold. The dampness from her old room seemed to have seeped into her bones, and she couldn't stop a shiver from racking her body. "You're cold," his voice rumbled from behind her, startling her. Before she could deny it, the mattress dipped. He was moving closer. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me." "Your leg," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. The cold must make the old injury ache. He was beside her now, sitting on the edge of the bed. She didn't dare look at him. "Let me help." And then his hand, his large, warm hand, was on her calf. She flinched, but his touch wasn't rough or demanding. It was careful. His thumb began to press into the tight knotted muscles of her leg, finding the sources of her constant pain with an unnerving accuracy. It was a strange, shocking intimacy. "Your skin is tough," he murmured, almost to himself. "From work." He wasn't wrong. She'd worked hard every day of her life. Despite herself, a sigh of relief escaped her lips as he worked a particularly nasty knot. The pain began to recede, replaced by a slow, spreading warmth. It felt good, too good. This was dangerous. This comfort was a trap. Just as she was thinking that, he pulled away. He stood and retrieved his heavy cloak from a nearby chair, the one he'd worn on the journey. It was thick black fur, and he draped it over her. His scent, intensified by the warmth of his body, enveloped her completely. It felt like a hug. It felt like protection. It felt like the most dangerous thing in the world. She heard a soft knock on the door and another man entered. His beta. "Kaylin," the man said, his voice low and concerned. "We need to talk. An omega? A broken one? Is this wise? The pack will see this as weakness." Arwen held her breath under the heavy cloak, listening to the silence that followed. She didn't have to see Kaylin's face to feel the sudden chill that entered the room, a coldness that had nothing to do with the storm outside. Chapter 10. A Ghost from the Past. The weeks following the storm were a strange, unsettling peace. Kaylin had given her a small, walled-off garden to tend, her own space. She spent hours there, her hands in the cool, dark earth, coaxing life from tiny seeds. It was the first time since her mother's death that she'd felt even a whisper of contentment. The bond to Kaylin was a constant thrum under her skin, a confusing mix of his fierce protectiveness and a surprising tenderness she didn't know how to handle. He watched her, always, but his gaze held no judgment, only a deep, possessive hunger that was both terrifying and thrilling. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. Arwen? That voice, a ghost from a life she'd tried to forget. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Liam, her former lover, if their fumbling, desperate teenage meetings could be called that. He stood at the gate of her garden, looking thin and nervous. He was part of the delegation her old alpha had sent to finalize the alliance. Liam, she breathed, her hands automatically wiping dirt on her tunic. What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. I had to see you, he said, taking a step closer. His eyes were wide and pleading. I heard what that monster did. He forced you, bit you in front of everyone. Arwen, this isn't you. Come back with me. We can run. Just like we always talked about. You belong with your own kind, not as some alpha's pet. He reached for her hand. He's just using you. Don't touch her. The voice was not a voice. It was a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the very stones of the garden wall. Kaylin appeared as if from nowhere, a silent shadow of pure rage. He didn't look at Arwen. His eyes, burning gold, were locked on Liam. He didn't speak another word. He just stepped between them, his body a solid shield. He was so much bigger than Liam, an apex predator facing a stray dog. He radiated a dominance so powerful, so absolute, that Arwen could barely breathe. The air grew thick with his unspoken threat, a threat of violence, a threat of death. Liam stumbled back, his face pale with terror. He looked from Kaylin's furious face to Arwen's, trapped between her past and her terrifying, possessive present. This was Kaylin's world, and in his world, there was no room for ghosts.
Chapter 11. A Traitor's Voice. Kaylin stormed into his study. The image of that pathetic Omega male trying to touch Arwen burned into his mind. His wolf was clawing at his insides, demanding he go back and rip Liam's throat out. It took every ounce of his control to hold it back. He was so consumed by his rage that he almost didn't hear her come in. Kaylin. Arwen's voice was quiet, but firm. We need to talk. It's about Marcus. Kaylin's head snapped up. What about him? He demanded, his tone harsher than he intended. He's never there, she said, her gaze steady despite his anger. She was so brave. Every time there's been a rogue sighting near the border, Marcus is the one who says it's nothing. He's always somewhere else. Last night he was supposed to be on the Western Patrol, but he wasn't. That's when 2 of our guards were injured. He stared at her. He wanted to dismiss it. He wanted to tell her she was being paranoid. This was Marcus, his childhood friend. The man who had stood by him when he'd challenged his uncle for the Alpha title. Marcus is my brother in all but blood, he said, his voice tight. You're letting fear cloud your judgment because of what happened at your old pack. Am I? She challenged softly. What's this about me, old friend? Marcus himself strode into the room, a charming smile on his face. But his eyes were cold as they flickered toward Arwen. Arwen has concerns, Kaylin said, waving a dismissive hand, but Arwen stood her ground. I asked why you weren't on patrol last night, Marcus. Marcus's smile vanished. He sneered at her, then turned to Kaylin, his face twisting into an ugly mask of fury. You'd listen to this broken Omega, over me, after everything I've done for you, for this pack? The word hung in the air. Done. Kaylin froze, the blood draining from his face. A cold dread washed over him. What have you done for this pack, Marcus? he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Marcus, cornered and furious, finally snapped. The truth spilled out, ugly and venomous. I've been leading the rogues. I've been showing them our weaknesses because you've gone soft. You chose her over power, over your own kind. She has made you weak. The betrayal was a physical blow. It knocked the air from his lungs, shattered his world. His best friend, his brother, a traitor. As he stood there, reeling, a new figure appeared in the doorway. Selene. A cruel, triumphant smile played on her lips. It seems your house is in chaos, Alpha Kalen, she purred. With your beta revealed as a traitor, your judgment is in question, and your choice of Luna is a disgrace. I challenge her for the position, a trial by combat.
Chapter 12. I accept the world tilted on its axis. Marcus. A traitor? The rogue attacks. They weren't random. They were planned. And Kalen. The look on his face was one of absolute devastation. A pain so deep it pulsed through the mate bond and lanced through Arwen's own heart. But there was no time to process it. No time to breathe. Because Selene's words sliced through the air, sharp and deadly as a blade. I challenge her for the position. Kalen's shattered expression morphed into pure murderous rage. He turned on Selene, a low snarl building in his chest. You dare! The law is the law, Alpha Kalen. One of the pack elders, drawn by the commotion, stood in the doorway. His face was grim. A challenge has been issued during a time of instability. It must be answered. Every eye in the room, Kalen's, Marcus's, the elders, turned to Arwen. They were all waiting. Waiting for her to do what any sane Omega would do. Cower. Refuse. Hide behind her powerful alpha mate. Selene was a trained warrior. She was bigger, stronger, and vicious. Arwin was broken. Everyone knew it. Kalen turned to her, his golden eyes pleading, his silent message screaming through the bond. Don't do it. Let me handle this. Let me protect you. For a moment, she almost did. The fear was a cold, coiling snake in her stomach. She could say no. She could let Kalen kill Selene for her audacity. It would be easy. But then she looked at Selene's smug, triumphant face. She thought of every whisper, every sneer, every moment she had been made to feel worthless, small, and weak. She thought of them calling her broken, her wolf, broken. A lifetime of being pushed down, of being invisible, of surviving in the dirt. It all coalesced into a single, hard point of light inside her. A point of pure, unadulterated rage. This wasn't about Kalen. This wasn't about the law. This was about her. Arwen took a small step forward. Her limp was barely there. She lifted her chin, her gaze locking with Selene's. Her voice, when she spoke, did not tremble. It was quiet, clear, and carried the weight of a final decision. I accept. The stunned silence in the room was absolute. It was broken only by Selene's delighted, cruel laughter.
Chapter 13. For myself. The hours after Arwen accepted the challenge were the longest of Kalen's life. He paced his study like a caged animal, the scent of his own rage and fear thick in the air. He had to stop this. The law could be damned. He was the alpha. He would not let his mate, the other half of his soul, walk to her death. Selene was a trained killer. Arwen was Arwen. She was soft and resilient and had a fire he was only just beginning to understand. But she was not a fighter. He would be signing her death warrant if he let this happen. He found her in the small garden she'd made her own, standing under the pale light of the moon. She wasn't crying. She wasn't trembling. She was just still. I forbid this, he growled, the words tearing from his throat. He strode toward her, his hands clenched into fists. I will not allow it. I'll lock you in this fortress. I'll fight Selene myself. I don't care about the law. She turned to him, and her calmness shocked him into silence. There was no fear in her eyes, only a deep, quiet resolve he'd never seen before. "No," she said softly. He stared at her, dumbfounded. "No. Arwen, she will kill you." "Maybe," she conceded with a small, sad smile. She took a step closer and did something that shattered his control completely. She reached out and gently touched his arm, a gesture of comfort, from her to him. "Kaelin, listen to me. You have to let me do this." "Why?" he demanded, his voice cracking with desperation. "Because this isn't about being your Luna," she explained, her voice gaining strength. "This isn't for the pack. This is for me. For every single time someone has whispered that I'm weak. For every time they've called me broken." Her gaze was fierce, and in their brown depths, he saw that same flicker of defiant gold. "I have to know, Kaelin. Not for you, not for them, but for myself. I have to know if they were wrong." He looked into her determined face and realized with a jolt that he could not command her here. He could order her to eat, to sleep, to stay by his side. But he could not order her spirit. For the first time in his life, the only thing he could do for someone he cared about was trust them. And it was the most terrifying thing he had ever done. He could only nod, his throat too tight for words as she walked away to face her fate.
Chapter 14. The Golden Awakening. The fighting circle was a ring of firelight and hungry eyes. The entire pack was there, their faces tense, waiting for the slaughter. Arwen stood opposite Selene, her bare feet cold on the packed earth. Selene was already circling her, a cruel smirk on her lips. She was bigger, faster, a trained warrior with claws like daggers. Arwen's only plan was to survive. The fight began. It wasn't a fight. It was a beating. Selene was a blur of motion. A sharp blow to Arwen's ribs stole her breath. A kick to her good leg sent her stumbling. Laughter rippled through some of Selene's supporters. Arwen could hear Kaelin roar her name from the sidelines, a sound of pure agony. But he was held back by his own guards. The law was absolute. He couldn't interfere. Pain was a white-hot fire in her body. She was on the ground, dirt and blood in her mouth, her bad legs screaming in protest. It was over. She had failed. Selene stood over her, breathing hard, her face flushed with victory. "See?" Selene sneered, loud enough for the whole pack to hear. "I told you. You're nothing but a weak, broken little Omega." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "And your wolf, it's as pathetic and useless as you are." Broken. That word, that single, hateful word. It broke something inside Arwen. Not her spirit, not her will. It broke the dam. A power she never knew she possessed, ancient, dormant, and utterly furious, erupted inside her like a supernova. It wasn't the quiet ember of her wolf. No, this was a raging inferno. A blinding, white-hot rage flooded her veins, burning away the pain, the fear, everything. Power surged through her limbs. Her head snapped up, and her eyes, they weren't brown anymore. They were blazing with the light of molten gold. Her bad leg suddenly felt strong, unbreakable. She moved. It was not a scramble. It was an explosion of speed. A blur. She was on her feet before Selene could even react. Selene lunged, but Arwen was no longer there. She sidestepped the clumsy attack with a feral grace she didn't know she had, and landed a single, powerful blow to Selene's side. The warrior stumbled back, shock and pain on her face. Arwen didn't stop. She pressed the attack, a whirlwind of fists and feet, moving with an instinct that was as old as the moon itself. The fight ended in seconds. She stood over a defeated, whimpering Selene, her chest heaving, the golden light in her eyes slowly receding. She had won. The clearing was dead silent. Every single wolf was staring at her with a mixture of shock, awe, and fear.
Chapter 15. A Father's Sin. Kaelin watched the end of the fight, his heart frozen in his chest. One moment Arwen was on the ground, broken, The next, she was transformed. The power that rolled off her, the golden light in her eyes. It was breathtaking, primal. He had never seen anything like it. She wasn't just a wolf. She was more. She was magnificent. He shoved past his guards, his only thought to get to her, to hold her, to make sure she was real. But the pack surged forward. The elders were trying to congratulate him, their faces a mixture of shock and reverence. He ignored them all, pushing through the crowd. He saw the pack healers tending to Arwen's minor cuts. He saw wolves who had sneered at her just days ago now looking at her with fawning respect. His heart swelled with pride. My Luna. Then he saw the old she-wolf, Ilara, the keeper of the pack's history, approach Arwen. He saw her whisper something to his mate, and he saw Arwen's face change. The flush of victory vanished, replaced by a pale mask of horror. Her eyes, now back to their soft brown, widened with a pain so profound it sent a spike of ice through the mate bond. What did she say? What did she do? Arwen stumbled back from the old wolf, her gaze sweeping the crowd until it landed on him. He saw the adoration and trust that had started to grow there. Shatter. It shattered into a million pieces of ice, replaced by a look of utter betrayal and revulsion. It was a look that gutted him, that tore his soul in two. Before he could push through the final ring of wolves to get to her, she turned. And she ran. She didn't limp. She fled from the celebration, from the victory, from the pack, from him. She disappeared into the darkness of the forest, leaving him standing there with his heart in his hands, and a single terrifying question echoing in the sudden silence of his mind. What had his family done? Chapter 16. A wall of ice. Following the trail of her scent, Jasmine, rain, and a new sharp note of pain, Kaelin found her in the room he'd given her, the room that was supposed to be her sanctuary. She was standing by the window, her back to him, staring out into the darkness. The victory, the celebration, the entire world had faded away. There was only the gaping chasm between them, a wound in his very soul. Her pain was a physical thing, a shard of ice twisting in his gut through the mate bond. Arwen, he said, his voice rough. Please, talk to me. I didn't know. She didn't turn. For a long moment she said nothing at all. The silence was worse than any screaming. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat, empty, a dead thing. You didn't know? You didn't know your father was a murderer? The words hit him like a physical blow. He flinched. No. I swear to you. She turned then, and her eyes. They were no longer the soft brown he was growing to love. They were no longer blazing with golden Lykan light. They were just cold. Hard and cold as winter stone. My mother wasn't a rogue who died in the wilderness, Kaelin. She was a victim. Your family's victim. Every word was a perfectly aimed dagger, coated in the poison of a truth he couldn't deny. He couldn't defend the man who had sired him. Not now. Not when faced with the ruins of this woman he was beginning to love. Arwen. He took a step forward, his hand outstretched, a desperate, instinctual need to comfort her, to hold her, to absorb her pain into himself. Don't, she hissed, recoiling from him as if his touch would burn her. Don't. Touch. Me. The rejection was absolute. The bond between them, once a source of heat and a strange, wonderful connection, now transmitted nothing but her icy agony and his own suffocating guilt. He had finally broken through her walls only to find she had built a new one, a wall of ice he knew he could never breach. He was her family's monster, and in her eyes, he was a monster too. Suddenly her cold expression shattered, replaced by a flash of pure panic. Her eyes darted around the room. Wait, where is Myra? She was sleeping. Arwen rushed past him, out of the room. Kaelin followed, his heart pounding with a new, fresh dread. They burst into the small room where the child had been sleeping. The bed was empty, and on the small pillow was a dirty folded piece of paper.
Chapter 17. A final message. The world narrowed to the small, grimy piece of paper in Arwen's trembling hand. The writing was crude, barely legible. We have the girl. Come alone to the old hollow oak at sunrise, or she dies. There was no signature, but there didn't need to be. At the bottom was a small, ugly drawing of a snarling wolf, Marcus's mark, a symbol he used to carve into trees on patrols. A wave of nausea washed over her. This was a trap meant for her. And they were using Myra, sweet, innocent Myra, as the bait. They were using her love as a weapon against her. Kaelin was saying something behind her, his voice frantic, talking about trackers and warriors. She didn't hear him. All she could hear was the frantic beating of her own heart. She had lost everything. Her mother was stolen from her by his family. Her victory was stolen from her by the truth. Her trust. He had stolen that too. Now they were trying to steal the last piece of her heart, the last pure thing in her shattered world. Myra. She wouldn't let them. Later, when the fortress was quiet and Kaelin was gone, organizing patrols, preparing for a war she no longer cared about, Arwen moved with a silent, resolute purpose. She went to her old room, the one with the leaky roof, and found the one thing that was truly hers, the tattered book, the one with stories of a different world. She took it to Kaelin's room, to the massive bed that still held her scent mixed with his. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. She placed the book on his pillow. For a long moment, she just stared at it. Then, with a shaking hand, she picked up a piece of charcoal from the fireplace and wrote inside the cover. He took my mother. Now he has my daughter. I am all she has left. Goodbye. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a final statement. A last will and testament. There was no hope left inside her. Only a cold, empty duty. Under the cover of the deep, moonless night, she slipped past the distracted guards. She didn't look back. She ran into the dark forest, her feet steady, her limp forgotten. She was running toward a trap. She was running toward a monster. She was running toward her end, and she did it alone.
Chapter 18. The Hollow Oak. He woke with a jolt. The bed was empty, cold. The scent of her, jasmine and rain, was a faint ghost in the air. A spike of pure panic shot through him. "Arwen!" he called out, his voice raw. Silence. He threw back the furs and saw it. A book on his pillow. Her book. His heart stopped. He snatched it up, his hands trembling as he saw the charcoal words scrawled inside. He took my mother. Now he has my daughter. I am all she has left. Goodbye. No. He breathed. The words were a death sentence. Her death sentence. She had gone alone. He roared her name, a sound of pure agony and fury that shook the fortress to its foundations. He didn't wait for guards. He didn't wait for trackers. He was the only tracker he needed. He followed the faint trail of her scent, a desperate prayer on his lips. Please be alive. Please be alive. He burst into the clearing of the hollow oak just as the sun was rising, and his world ended. She was on her knees, bleeding, surrounded by at least a dozen of Marcus's mangy rogues. Marcus himself stood behind her, a triumphant sneer on his face. In the grip of two other rogues was the child Myra, sobbing in terror. Arwen was fighting, he could see that. Her Lykan power flickered around her like a dying flame, but she was exhausted, defeated. As he watched in horror, a rogue raised a rusty blade over the small child. Arwen saw it. Her head fell, a single tear cutting a path through the dirt and blood on her cheek. It was a look of utter despair, of surrender. She had lost. All was lost. And the wolf inside Kaelin, the beast he had kept chained and controlled for so long, finally, completely, broke free. A roar of pure, primal, unrestrained fury tore from his throat, a sound that was not human, not wolf, but something much, much older. He didn't run into the clearing. He exploded into it, a whirlwind of black fur and claws and incandescent rage. His only thought, his only mission, his only reason for existing in that moment was burned into his soul. Kill them all. Chapter 19. A Whirlwind of Rage. The world went red. There was no thought, no strategy. There was only the roar of his wolf and the singular burning need to destroy everything that threatened her. He was a flash of claws, a spray of blood, a rogue falls, another lunges. He met it with a snarl, his teeth sinking into flesh, the coppery taste of the rogue's lifeblood on his tongue. He was outnumbered, 10-1. He didn't care. He was an alpha of the Duskbane pack, and they had hurt his mate. For that, they would all die. He moved through the chaos, a whirlwind of fury, a force of nature that could not be stopped. But even in his rage, a part of him was aware of her. He saw Arwen. She wasn't cowering. She wasn't crying. She had scrambled to her feet, snatched up a fallen branch, and was standing over the small child, Myra, like a cornered she-wolf protecting her cub. She was wounded, bleeding, and exhausted. But she was fighting. She was magnificent. In that instant, seeing her fierce, hopeless courage, everything became terrifyingly clear. He was wrong. He was a fool. He had been so wrong not to trust her intuition about Marcus, so wrong to let his pride and his past cloud his judgment, so wrong to believe his father's sins were buried and gone. He saw her not as a broken thing to be sheltered, but as a queen defending her own. A warrior. And the possessive, primal need he felt for her, it finally coalesced into a single devastating truth. He didn't just want her. He didn't just need her. He loved her. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow, nearly bringing him to his knees. It fueled his rage, gave it a sharp, desperate edge. He fought with a renewed savagery, clearing a path toward her, toward the center of his universe. He had to get to her. He had to tell her. But then, a rogue slipped past his guard. A big, ugly brute with a scarred face and a rusty axe. It ignored him, charging straight for Arwen and the child. Kaelin roared her name, a sound of pure terror, and lunged after it. But he was too far. He wasn't going to make it. He was going to watch her die.
Chapter 20. The Lykan Queen. Arwen saw the scarred rogue charging at her. She saw the rusty axe raised high. She saw Kaelin, a beautiful, deadly storm of rage, fighting for her, fighting to get to her. And in that moment, the last of her fear burned away. Her despair from the all-is-lost moment had smothered her power, but Kaelin's arrival, his raw fury on her behalf, it was the spark that reignited the flame. And this time, it was not just a flame. It was an inferno. Power, raw, ancient, and absolutely breathtaking, crashed through her. It was a tidal wave of golden light, flooding every cell of her body, healing her, strengthening her. The world came into sharp, vivid focus. Her eyes blazed. She met the rogue's charge not with a scream, but with a feral snarl of her own. She didn't just move. She exploded. With a speed that defied nature, she shoved Myra behind her and met the axe-wielding rogue head-on. She sidestepped his clumsy swing, her hand lashing out to grab his wrist. With a surge of impossible strength, she twisted. The sound of bone snapping echoed in the clearing. The rogue howled in pain. She didn't hesitate. She drove her palm into his chest, sending him flying backward into another rogue, taking them both down. The battle turned. Kaelin was no longer fighting alone. She was with him. They were no longer two separate beings. They were a single, terrifying unit. A king and queen of shadow and fury. They moved without a word, a perfect, deadly dance. He would block, she would strike. She would faint, he would kill. He was the storm. She was the lightning. An alpha and a Lykan, a power not seen together in generations, clearing the field of their enemies. They were beautiful. They were terrifying. They were one. In minutes, it was over. The last of the common rogues lay dead or dying. Arwen stood back to back with Kaelin, her chest heaving, her body thrumming with a power she was only just beginning to understand. They were covered in dirt and blood, but they were victorious. But the true enemy, the true monster, still stood. Marcus, his face a mask of disbelief and hatred, stepped forward, his own silver blade gleaming in the dawn light.
Chapter 21. A Shield of Love. Kaelin stood with Arwen, his body aching, his wolf purring in satisfaction at having his mate fighting by his side. She was incredible, more than he ever could have imagined. But the danger wasn't over. He turned to face his former friend, his brother, the traitor. "This is between us, Kaelin." Marcus spat, his eyes wild with a crazed hatred. "It was always between us." He lunged, but he didn't lunge at Kaelin. It was a feint, a cowardly, desperate move. He darted to the side, his silver dagger aimed directly at Arwen's heart. He knew Kaelin's weakness now. He knew it was her. Kaelin saw the move. He saw the blade. He saw the murderous intent in Marcus's eyes. He had to choose, defend himself or defend his mate. For the old Kaelin, the cold, calculating alpha who trusted no one, it might have been a choice. For this Kaelin, the one who had finally admitted he loved her, there was no choice at all. He didn't think, he didn't hesitate, he just moved. He threw himself in front of Arwen, a human shield, a shield of love. The blade, long and coated in the milky poison of wolfsbane, slid between his ribs. Pain, searing, white-hot and absolute, exploded in his side. A gasp tore from his lips. Arwen screamed his name, a sound of pure agony that was 1,000 times worse than the physical pain. But even as the poison began its deadly work, he didn't fall. Not yet. He used the momentum of the blow to grab Marcus's wrist, twisting until the traitor dropped the dagger. He slammed his fist into Marcus's face, sending him stumbling back into the waiting arms of his own loyal warriors who had just arrived. The traitor was finally captured. The battle was won. But his strength was gone. The world began to spin. The edges of his vision went dark. The last thing he saw before he collapsed was Arwen's face, her beautiful face, twisted in absolute terror as she rushed to catch him.
Chapter 22. A Tide of Gold. Kaelin! The name was a raw scream torn from Arwen's throat. She caught him as he fell, his dead weight crashing her to the forest floor. His blood, so much blood, was soaking her tunic, hot and sticky against her skin. His face was pale, his breathing a shallow, rattling gasp. The bond between them, once a thrumming wire of heat and emotion, was now a fading, fraying thread. He was slipping away. She could feel him dying. "No," she whispered, her hands frantically pressing against the gruesome wound in his side. "No, no, no." His warriors were shouting, calling for healers, but the fortress was too far away. They would never make it in time. He was dying right here, in her arms. The man who had taken a blade for her. The man who had fought for her. The man who, despite everything, she loved. The realization was as sharp and painful as the blade that had struck him down. The Lykan power, the golden tide she had just discovered, was still thrumming in her veins, a wild, untamed river of pure life force. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't have a plan. There was only instinct, a desperate, primal need to save him. "You don't get to die," she snarled, her voice a feral growl. She leaned over him, pressing her forehead to his. "You don't get to leave me. Do you hear me?" She closed her eyes and pushed. She took all of that wild, golden river of power inside her and forced it out through her hands, pouring it directly into his wound. The sensation was agony. It felt like her very soul was being ripped from her body, her life force draining away in a torrent of blinding light. The world dissolved into pain and gold. It was fire. It was ice. It was everything. But she didn't stop. She held on, pushing more and more of herself into him. Through the bond, she could feel his wound knitting itself back together. She could feel the poison burning away, and she could feel her own consciousness her own life, fading into a peaceful, welcoming blackness. Her last thought before the darkness took her completely was of his face, his scent, his name.
Chapter
Kaelin.
23. You were never broken. He woke to the scent of jasmine and ozone. The pain in his side was gone, utterly and completely gone. He looked down, his mind foggy, and saw not a gaping wound, but a fresh pink scar, already healing. It was impossible. He should be dead. He felt weak, drained, but he was alive. Then he saw her. Arwen. She was collapsed beside him on the forest floor, as pale and still as a fallen statue. Her chest was barely moving, and he understood. In a single heart-stopping moment, he knew exactly what she had done. She had saved him. She had poured her own life into his. She had traded her own vibrant, powerful soul for his damaged one. No. He breathed the word, a prayer, a curse. He gathered her into his arms, his heart clenching in terror at how light she was, how limp. She felt so fragile, so breakable. But she wasn't. He knew that now. He pressed his face into her soft hair, inhaling the faint scent that was uniquely hers. "Oh, Arwen," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion so powerful it threatened to break him. He held her tight against his chest, as if he could give the life force back through his own will. "You were never broken," he choked out, the words raw with love and regret. "You were just waiting. You were mine. Always." He carried her back to the fortress himself, roaring for his healers. They worked frantically, their faces grim. She had pushed her life force to the very brink. It was a miracle she was breathing at all. He didn't leave her side for a moment. For days, he sat by her bed, holding her hand, watching her pale face. Myra sat on the other side, a small, silent guardian. Kaelin watched his mate, his queen, his savior, and he prayed to any god that would listen to let him hear her voice just one more time. On the third day, her fingers twitched in his. He held his breath. Slowly, agonizingly, her eyelids fluttered open. Her soft brown eyes, hazy with confusion, found his. She was alive. She was back. And the relief that crashed over him was the most powerful thing he had ever felt.
Chapter 24. My equal, my mate, my queen. Weeks later, Arwen stood on a raised platform, the cool night air kissing her skin. The entire Duskbane pack was gathered before her, along with a humbled delegation from her old pack, Silvermoon. She wasn't wearing the drab, mended tunic of an Omega. She was dressed in shimmering silver and black silks, the colors of a Duskbane Luna. Her limp, once the defining feature of her existence, was now just a faint memory. She felt whole. Beside her, Kaelin's presence was a warm, solid wall of strength. His hand found hers, his fingers lacing through her own. He was healed. They were healed. In his other hand, he held a heavy silver pendant carved with the snarling wolf of his family crest, the crest of the family whose patriarch had ordered her mother's death. But as he fastened it around her neck, the cold metal felt not like a chain, but like a promise, a new beginning. Kaelin turned to the silent, watching crowd, his voice booming with a power that echoed across the clearing. "You see before you my mate," he declared. "The one who defeated a challenger in single combat when all believed she was weak. The one who saved my life with her own power when all hope was lost. The one whose strength rivals my very own." The pack stared, their eyes filled with an awe and respect she had never known. Then, Kaelin turned to her. He lowered his voice, his golden eyes soft and filled with a love so profound it made her heart ache. "My equal," he murmured, for her alone. "My mate." He then faced the crowd one last time, raising his voice in a triumphant, joyous roar that shook the mountains. "My queen!" He bowed his head to her, a deep, reverent bow, and as one, the entire clearing, alphas, betas, warriors, and omegas from two packs, sank to one knee. They bowed to her, Arwen, the broken omega no one had wanted. She met Kaylin's loving gaze, her hand tightening in his. She could feel the soft, golden light of her Lykan power glowing just behind her eyes, a quiet testament to her true nature. She was not broken. She was a survivor. She was a warrior. She was a queen. And she was finally, completely home.